I stood on the wooden floor of the military compound's auditorium, the red carpet beneath my feet stretching all the way to the main entrance. 5 minutes ago, festive music had been playing here. 5 minutes later, the air was so cold, it felt as if it had frozen solid. Ethan held a pale-faced Sarah in his arms. Because he was in such a hurry, the hem of his military greatcoat swept against a nearby enamel cup, knocking it over with a loud crash. That sound was like a sudden thunderclap, shattering the obsessed version of me from my past life. "Ethan," I said, my voice so cold and clear that even I found it unfamiliar. His footsteps faltered for a moment, and he turned to look at me, his handsome face etched with anxiety and the impatience of being interrupted. His brow was furrowed as he growled in a low voice. "Lucy, Sarah's heart condition is acting up. I'm the only one here who's seen her medical records. I'll explain everything about the wedding when I get back." The surrounding guests whispered among themselves, their fragmented voices pricking at me like needles. Sarah didn't faint earlier or later. She chose right when they were exchanging rings. "Commander Miller is leaving his bride behind like this. Where is the Reed family supposed to put their pride?" Lucy has such a strong personality. She's definitely going to make a scene. In my past life, I did exactly that. I grabbed his sleeve and wouldn't let go, crying hysterically, calling Sarah a homewrecker and Ethan heartless. The result? Ethan pushed me away in front of everyone, his eyes as cold as ice. He called me unreasonable, and that wedding became the start of a lifelong nightmare. After we married, out of guilt, he went to extremes to compensate Sarah, while I lived in a sexless marriage for 40 years, finally closing my eyes for the last time in a desolate hospital room. God must have opened his eyes and let me return to this very moment. In Ethan's arms, Sarah weakly opened her eyes, her fingers clutching his collar tightly as her voice came out as thin as silk. "Ethan, don't go. I feel so bad. Am I going to die?" "Don't talk nonsense. I'm taking you to the hospital right now," Ethan said. He turned to me, his tone softening slightly but still carrying a sense of non-negotiable charity. "Lucy, be sensible. A life is at stake. Go ahead and have dinner with the guests first. I'll be back as soon as I've handled this." I didn't say a word. I just stared at him. The brand new green military uniform he was wearing had been hand-ironed by me, the collar so flat there wasn't a single wrinkle. Under everyone's gaze, I slowly raised my hand and unpinned the ceremonial red flower from my chest. "Lucy, what are you doing?" Ethan's eyes darkened, clearly annoyed by what he saw as my stalling. I walked up to him and stuffed the bright silk flower directly into his pocket. "There's no need to wait until you've handled anything, and there's no need for an explanation," I said, looking at him calmly, my gaze flickering over the trembling woman in his arms. "Ethan, I'm not going through with this wedding." The entire room went dead silent. Ethan froze, seemingly forgetting the critically ill patient in his arms. He stared at me, a flash of absurdity flickering in his eyes. "Lucy, do you know what you're saying? Calling off a wedding over a small matter like this? Both sets of parents are here. Do you want the Reed and Miller families to lose all face?" "This isn't a tantrum," I said, taking a step back to widen the distance between us. That sense of distance gave me a feeling of freedom I had never known before. "Since you believe a life is at stake, then hurry up and save your life. As for my life, I don't need to waste it on a relationship that can be interrupted by a heart condition at any moment." I turned around, meeting the shocked gazes of my parents below the stage. "Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't think this marriage through properly. From today on, Ethan and I are settled. In the future, whether we marry others or stay single, we have nothing to do with each other." I bowed. My voice wasn't loud, but I made sure it reached everyone's ears. "Lucy," Ethan yelled through gritted teeth, clearly fuming. "Don't think I don't know you're playing hard to get. You want me to beg you in public? If something happens to Sarah, can you take responsibility for that?" I didn't even look back, leaving him with only one final sentence. "Go ahead and take her. If you don't come back, that's on me. If you do come back, please just stay by her side for the rest of your life and stop ruining mine." I walked out of the auditorium with long strides. The early winter wind of 1984 carried a bone-chilling cold, blowing through my hair where I had just removed the veil. Ethan didn't chase after me. In his logic, Lucy was the tag-along who had followed him for 10 years, the virtuous woman who had practiced her cooking and cleaning just to marry him. He was certain I wouldn't make it out the gates of the military compound, certain I'd be crying and begging for his forgiveness by nightfall. But he didn't know that my first move after leaving the auditorium was to go to the compound's guest house. I took off the conspicuous red wedding dress and changed into a crisp Dacron shirt and navy blue trousers. The woman in the mirror was 22 with firm skin, yet her eyes held a depth that usually only comes at 50. I opened my small leather purse, which contained all the savings I had scraped together over the years and a photograph I had once cherished like a treasure, though it looked utterly ridiculous to me now. I tore the photo to pieces and threw them into the trash can. "Lucy, you've really gone crazy," my childhood friend Sam panted as he ran into the guest house. He had heard the news and chased after me. "Ethan went to save a life. If you call off the wedding now, the gossip in this compound will drown you alive," Sam warned. "The life belongs to Sarah, and his belongs to her too. The only life that doesn't belong to them is mine," I replied, tucking my bank book away and looking at him calmly. "Sam, do me a favor. Go to the train station and check for tickets to Pengcheng. The sooner, the better." "Pengcheng? Why on earth would you go to that wild place in the south?" Sam's eyes widened. "To live," I said, patting his shoulder. Since I had been reborn, I was going to see the world and make a name for myself in the midst of all that change. As for Ethan, let him hold on to his life-saving medicine and rot away slowly in this stagnant military compound. Half an hour later, Mrs. Higgins from the family committee rushed in, looking frantic. "Lucy, Ethan has already settled Sarah into the special care unit. He's back at the auditorium now with a dark face, waiting for you to return and clean up this mess. He told me to tell you that as long as you're willing to admit you were wrong, he'll act like today never happened." Mrs. Higgins continued her persuasion. "Lucy, dear, men are career-oriented, and Commander Miller is famous for his helpful nature. You should be more understanding." Listening to these familiar lines, a cold sneer curled my lips. "Mrs. Higgins," I said, picking up my simple, packed luggage and walking past her without stopping. "Tell him not to wait. Since he loves being understanding so much, let him be understanding toward Sarah for the rest of his life." As I walked out the door of the guest house, a sliver of the setting sun hung on the horizon. That fiery red color looked exactly like the ceremonial flower I had just torn off, but it was merely a dying sun. Darkness was coming, but what would rise tomorrow was a new life belonging to me. By the time I returned to the dormitory in the family quarters, it was pitch black. I didn't turn on the overhead light, opting instead for the desk lamp. A heavy silence filled the room under the dim, yellowish glow. This was supposed to have been the bridal chamber for Ethan and me. The double happiness stickers on the wall weren't even dry yet, and new towels embroidered with mandarin ducks hung on the washstand. Everything was a mockery. Without hesitation, I dragged a heavy leather suitcase from under the bed and began tallying my savings. To get married, I had taken out all $800 of the stipends I'd saved over the years to buy a Red Plum television and a Power brand washing machine for the Miller household. "Lucy!" The door was suddenly slammed open, hitting the wall with a dull thud. Ethan charged in, bringing a blast of cold air with him. His military greatcoat was unbuttoned, and his breath came out in white mist from the winter night. When he saw the suitcase on the floor, his pupils snapped shut, his voice thick with suppressed rage. "Haven't you had enough of this tantrum? Sarah is still in the observation room. I've been running myself ragged, yet here you are, running back alone to pack your bags. Is this act really fun for you?" I didn't even look up as I folded my clothes into the suitcase. "Ethan, I told you the wedding is off. This isn't an act. This is a settlement." Just because I carried her to the hospital, he strode over and grabbed my wrist, his grip incredibly strong. "She's the orphan of a martyr from the performance troupe, and my comrade. She collapsed in the auditorium. Was I supposed to just watch her die? Lucy, you used to be so kind. How did you become so selfish and narrow-minded?" I stopped what I was doing and looked him straight in the eye. What was hidden in the depths of his gaze wasn't guilt, but a sense of superiority. That "why are you being so difficult" attitude. If she was sick, you could have called an ambulance, called the medic in the auditorium, or even called for a vehicle from the logistics department to take her, I said, shaking off his hand. My tone was as calm as if I were discussing tomorrow's weather. But you chose to pick her up and rush out right at the moment we were exchanging rings, in front of all the guests. Ethan, what you gave her wasn't just medical assistance. It was a slap in the face to me in public, telling everyone that I, Lucy Reed, am not worth a single strand of Sarah's hair. "It was an emergency," he shouted, his voice rising out of a sudden sense of guilt. "Every time it involves her, it's an emergency," I laughed self-deprecatingly. I pulled 2 receipts out of the drawer and slapped them on the desk. "I paid for the TV and the washing machine. That's $482.60. There's also the money I used to help your comrades these past 2 years, and the money I lent to your family back home. The ledger is all here. Ethan, you're a commander. You care about discipline. Since we aren't getting married, let's settle the accounts clearly." Ethan looked as if he'd been pricked by a needle, his face turning pale and then flushed. In that era, a man's pride was bigger than his life, especially for an officer who viewed honor as his very existence. "You're humiliating me," he said, his voice trembling. "Are you really going to settle debts with me?" "I'm cutting ties with you," I said sharply, stuffing the last sweater into the suitcase and snapping the locks shut. "First thing tomorrow morning, I'm going to the factory to apply for a transfer. You can keep the money and the things. Sarah will probably find a use for them later. Don't you dare leave." Ethan suddenly lunged and pinned the suitcase down, his eyes turning red. It was the anger of someone realizing control was slipping through his fingers. "Lucy, if you leave this compound, if you leave my protection, where can a woman like you even go? Do you have any idea how chaotic things are out there right now? Don't make a joke out of your future." I looked at him, and the final ripple in the depths of my heart settled into a calm stillness. He thought he was my safe harbor, never realizing that in my past life, every storm I faced was caused by him. No matter how chaotic the world outside is, it's still cleaner than this room. I picked up my suitcase and walked around him toward the door. Ethan grabbed my shoulder, his grip so strong he nearly pulled me back into his arms. Just then, a frantic knocking came from the door. "Ethan, are you in there?" Sarah's voice, with its trademark fragility, drifted in tremulously. "The nurse said you left something at the hospital. I was worried, so I asked Officer Liu to drive me over to take a look. Did I make Lucy angry?" Ethan's hand froze. I took the opportunity to break free and turned to see Sarah standing outside the door, draped in another one of Ethan's old military coats, her face as white as paper. "You've arrived at the perfect time," I said with a slight smile at Sarah. The expression left both of them stunned. "Ethan, she said she was worried about you. Shouldn't you hurry up and support her? If she faints at my doorstep again, I won't be able to handle the responsibility." "Lucy, stop being so sarcastic. Sarah means well," Ethan said, instinctively trying to defend her, though his feet stayed rooted to the spot out of guilt. "Keep her good intentions for yourself to save her slowly." I squeezed past the doorframe with my suitcase. As I passed Sarah, I paused and spoke in a voice only the 3 of us could hear. "Sarah, you don't have to act anymore. I'm stepping aside. You and your hero can spend the rest of your lives together." I didn't stay to see the colorful expressions on their faces as I strode into the night. The roads in the military compound were long, the shadows of the sycamore trees on either side flickering in the dark. I went straight to the single dorms at the factory and found the director, who was just about to turn in for the night. "Director, I've made up my mind. I'll take that draftsman position for the mission to support the Shenzhen Special Economic Zone." The director pushed up his glasses, looking surprised. "Lucy, that place is just a giant construction site right now. The conditions are brutal, and you're just about to get married." "The wedding is off," I said calmly as I handed over my application. "I want to see the real world while I'm still young." At the moment I signed my name, I felt a set of shackles deep within my soul completely shatter. That night, Ethan sat in the dormitory at the family quarters for the entire night. He stared at the pile of receipts and the cold ledger on the desk, realizing for the first time that the Lucy who always waited for him under the light was truly never coming back. Meanwhile, I was sitting in an old Jeep heading to the train station. Sam sighed as he drove. "You're something else." Ethan suddenly sent over that $400, plus an extra $200. He said it was compensation. I took the stack of bills and stuffed them into my pocket without even counting them. "It's what I deserve. Sam, the most worthless thing in this world is being sensible. From today on, I'm living for myself." The first snow of 1984 began to fall quietly as the train whistle pierced the air. Ethan, Sarah, this tiny compound and its drama could no longer trap me. By the time I reached Pengcheng in 1984, the city felt like a giant beast that had just woken up. The streets were filled with the roar of bulldozers and swirling dust. When I stepped out of the Luohu railway station, the humid, sweltering air immediately wrapped around me. There was none of the rigid order of the military compound here. The streets were packed with young people in Dacron shirts carrying imitation leather briefcases, all rushing as if their lives depended on it. Everyone had "making money" written in their eyes. I didn't report to my assigned unit immediately. Instead, I went to the Sheikho industrial zone. The $600 in my pocket could buy a few big-ticket items back in the capital, but in Pengcheng, where gold was supposedly everywhere, it would only last a few months if I didn't use my head. Guided by my memories, I found a small one-story house in a dusty alley with a sign that read, "Trade Consultancy." "You want to do electronic components?" The man sitting behind the large mahogany desk was named Silas. He wore an impeccably tailored white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, a cold, unlit cigarette held between his fingers. The way he looked at people wasn't full of the blind, hot-blooded passion of most young people in this era. Instead, it held a chilly sharpness that saw right through to the essence of profit. "No, I want to make integrated motherboards for digital watches." I pushed a few drafting papers toward him. These were circuit improvement diagrams I had drawn in my spare time. Although current technology hadn't reached the level of the future yet, in 1984, these were enough to increase the yield rate of similar products by 20%. Silas glanced at the drawings, and his casual gaze instantly locked on. He looked up, truly studying me for the first time. "Did you draw these?" "Miss Reed, which research institute do you work for?" "Just some personal insights on converting military tech for civilian use," I said, keeping my cards close to my chest. "Mr. Silas, since you can get import licenses, you should know how much foreign exchange these drawings can save. I don't want a base salary. I want 5% of the net profit from this batch, plus a workbench in this factory." Silas laughed. It was the look of someone who had finally met a worthy opponent. "Miss Reed, this business drive of yours doesn't make you look like a draftsman with a steady paycheck. Steady paychecks break easily. A golden paycheck is the only one you can rely on." 3 days after I reached a preliminary agreement with Silas, a registered letter from the capital arrived at my temporary address. It was written by Ethan. His handwriting was still crisp and powerful, but the words between the lines carried a sense of patronizing tolerance. "Lucy, going south was an act of impulse. Sarah has already been discharged. She feels terrible about what happened and even wanted to come to Pengcheng to apologize to you in person. But I stopped her. Come back once you've had enough of the hardships down there. I haven't let the HR department finalize your transfer application yet. As long as you're willing to come back, we can redo the wedding privately. Be sensible and stop making a scene." Looking at the words "sensible," I felt a wave of nausea. To this day, he still believed I left out of jealousy, simply wanting a few soft words from him. He couldn't grasp the fact that I no longer needed a so-called wedding to define the rest of my life. I flipped the letter over and wrote 4 words on the back. "Official business only. No personal contact." I mailed it back, enclosing a photo of myself eating at a roadside stall near a construction site in Pengcheng. In the photo, I had cut my long hair short, my eyes were bright, and the background was a bustling, chaotic construction zone. For the next 3 months, I lived like a spinning top. During the day, I handled tedious surveying data at my assigned unit. At night, I dived into the lab Silas provided, repeatedly calibrating expensive imported equipment. In an era where even the air smelled like rust, I was among the first brave enough to take a leap of faith. Silas often came by in the middle of the night, carrying 2 cans of cold Coke. "Ethan wrote to you again," he said, leaning against the workbench and glancing at the unopened envelope in the trash can. "Mr. Silas seems very interested in my private affairs." I replied without looking back, focused on soldering the circuit board. "Just curious what kind of man could make Miss Reed avoid him like the plague." Silas set the Coke down, his long fingers tapping the tabletop. "I heard he's already been promoted to Deputy Division Commander in the capital's military district. He has a limitless future. Is it worth giving him up to suffer like this?" I set down the soldering iron and turned to look at him. "Mr. Silas, if a future is tied to someone who will abandon you for someone else at any moment, that's not a future. That's being a parasite." In this life, I only believe in the blueprints drawn by my own hands. Silas looked at me, a different spark appearing in his eyes. He pulled an invitation from his pocket and handed it to me. There's a foreign trade exchange at Shannon Avenue next week. You're our technical backbone. Come with me. You might even run into some people from your hometown. My heart skipped a beat. On the day of the exchange, I changed into a sharp, dark blue blazer and tied my hair back into a neat ponytail. At the entrance of the banquet hall, I unexpectedly ran into a familiar face. It was Ethan. He was dressed in his full formal military uniform, standing solemnly in the center of the hall as the head of security for the Capitol's inspection delegation. When he saw me walking behind Silas, radiant and conversing fluently in English with foreign guests, he froze on the spot. In his mind, the Lucy he saw should have been destitute, regretful, and covered in dust. But the woman before him was so dazzling he hardly dared to recognize her. Lucy! He instinctively took a step forward, his voice trembling with disbelief. I stopped and gave him a polite but distant nod. Deputy Commander Miller, long time no see. Thank you for your hard work on this official mission. With that, I took Silas's arm and walked past him toward the center of the spotlight. The chandeliers in the banquet hall were dizzying. Ethan's upright military uniform stood out sharply among the sea of businessmen in suits. As I held Silas's arm, preparing to walk toward the foreign representatives, Ethan stepped forward quickly to block our path. His breathing was ragged, and his normally rigid military composure cracked the moment he looked at me. Lucy, is this what you meant by to live? He stared at my hand on Silas's arm, his voice low and laced with a thick, sharp edge. Is this why you refused to return to the capital? Why you didn't even reply to my letters? Just to climb up with a profiteering businessman like this? Silas shifted slightly, shielding me by half an inch, a playful smirk on his lips. Deputy Commander Miller, the term profiteer is a bit outdated these days. The country is encouraging economic growth. As for you, blocking our company's technical consultant in public, isn't that a bit against protocol? Technical consultant? Ethan asked, as if he'd heard a joke. His gaze bypassed Silas, locking onto me. Lucy, you draw mechanical blueprints. What do you know about electronic trade? You're making a mockery of your own reputation. Come back with me. Don't embarrass yourself here. I let go of Silas's hand and took a step forward. The bone-deep reliance I once had for him had long since turned to ash. Deputy Commander Miller, your understanding of me is still stuck at the stage where I only know how to mend your clothes. I took a glass of soda from a passing waiter's tray, my tone calm. That German representative just said their yield rate for integrated motherboards hasn't improved. If I recall correctly, that is the very technology your inspection delegation is most eager to bring in. Unfortunately, my improvement plan was just patented by Mr. Silas's company. Ethan was stunned. The technicians he had brought were standing awkwardly nearby. One of the senior experts leaned in and whispered in Ethan's ear, Commander Miller, that lady is the expert Mr. Silas brought in. The logic behind those soldering points she pointed out earlier was truly an eye-opener for us, the expert added. Ethan's face flushed red, and then turned a pale white. He was used to looking down on me, used to playing the savior in my life. This sudden reversal of roles caused him a level of frustration he had never felt before. Even so, he said, trying to regain some semblance of paternal authority, a young woman like you, scrambling around in a place like Shannon Avenue, what kind of image is that? Do you have any idea what people back in the compound are saying about you? Because of your sudden disappearance, Sarah has been crying every day out of guilt. Her health has collapsed again. What does her health have to do with me? I interrupted, my gaze as cold as ice. Ethan, your logic is bizarre. You think I'm suffering because I left you, and you think my success is due to some man. What actually scares you isn't that I'm doing poorly, it's the realization that without you, I'm doing even better. You're panicking. Just then, Sarah actually appeared at the entrance. She was wearing a plain white dress, walking toward us like a fragile willow swaying in the wind. She was clearly part of the performance troupe accompanying the inspection delegation. Ethan, why are you here? The moment she saw me, her expression went through a kaleidoscope of changes. Shock, followed quickly by her signature look of a self-sacrificing martyr. Lucy, is it really you? Thank God, I'm just so glad you're okay. After you left, Ethan smoked night after night. I was worried sick. Please, just come back with him. If you come back, I'll do anything to make it up to you. She spoke loudly enough to draw the attention of many people nearby. Looking at her face full of forced concern, I suddenly felt that it was a miracle my past self had ever lost to her. That full of holes acting was so transparent once you looked at it without emotion. "Miss Miller, there's no need for compensation," I said with a small smile, my gaze falling on the jade pendant around her neck. That jade. Ethan bought it with his merit bonus, right? It was meant to be a wedding gift. Since it looks so good on you, keep wearing it. After all, only trash needs to be recycled constantly. Sarah's face turned deathly pale instantly, and she instinctively covered her neck. I only wore it because I saw it locked in Ethan's drawer. I was afraid it would get damaged. "That's enough," Ethan barked. It wasn't clear who he was yelling at. "Silas, the foreign investors are calling for us," I said, turning to him. Silas naturally draped an arm over my shoulder and nodded to Ethan. "Excuse us, Deputy Commander Miller. Oh, and by the way, as a business partner, I should remind you, it's not very polite to stare at someone else's fiancé." "Fiancé?" Ethan's voice spiked, his fists clenching so hard the veins on the back of his hands bulged. I didn't bother to explain Silas's choice of words. I simply followed him deeper into the social circle. That entire night, Ethan stood in the corner. He watched me navigate effortlessly between high-profile figures of all backgrounds and nationalities. He saw me laughing and talking, saw my confidence and poise, and saw that I never once looked back in his direction. He suddenly realized that the Lucy whose eyes used to be filled only with him, the Lucy who would get nervous for half a day if he so much as turned a hair, had died on that snowy wedding day. When the banquet ended and I walked out of the hotel, Ethan still hadn't left. He crushed the last half of his cigarette under a street lamp and called out to me, his voice hoarse. "Lucy, I checked. You never reported to your assigned unit. This is an unauthorized absence from your post. You'll be disciplined." I stopped and pulled a document with a red official seal from my bag, tossing it into his arms. It was my resignation. "Deputy Commander Miller, I didn't abandon my post. I'm a free agent." He held the report as if it were a piece of red-hot iron, unable to speak for a long time. "Lucy, what exactly do you want?" he asked, almost in despair. "A title? Money? Or for me to stay away from Sarah? Just say the word, and I'll go back and apply to have her transferred to a remote area." I looked at this man who had caused me a lifetime of pain in my previous life, and found him pathetic. "Ethan, I don't want anything anymore. What I want now is something you can't afford to give." I got into Silas's black Crown sedan. As the window rolled up, it cut off Ethan's face, filled with regret and shock, into another world. 3 months later, my factory officially opened in Sheko. The 4 large characters Chilon Electronics shone brightly under the southern sun. This wasn't just an OEM factory. It was one of the first private enterprises in the country to master independent integrated motherboard technology. On opening day, Silas sent 2 massive flower baskets but didn't show up in person. He knew I didn't care for noisy social functions. I was leaning over, checking the customs declaration forms for our first batch of export orders, when my secretary, Chen, rushed in with a strange look on her face. "President Reed, there's a comrade in uniform outside looking for you. He says he's your family. Family." Those 2 words felt like a rusty needle, making my fingertips tremble slightly. I walked out of my office and saw Ethan standing by the guardhouse, looking absolutely despondent. He had clearly just rushed over from the capital, looking travel-worn. The military uniform he once wore with such pride was even creased in a few places. To my surprise, Sarah was right behind him, her eyes red from crying. "Lucy," Ethan said, taking a step forward, his voice carrying a glimmer of hope that bordered on humble. "I took a long leave of absence specifically to come and get you. You've had your fun, and you've made your point. These past few months, the rumors in the compound have been scandalous. They say you're out here mixed up with questionable people. Come back with me. I can help you settle all that gossip." I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. Even now, his first instinct was to assume I was just making a scene, and that his meager bit of authority could settle my life. "Lucy, please don't blame Ethan," Sarah said, stepping forward to grab my sleeve, but I pivoted to avoid her touch. "It's because of me. I accidentally let it slip that you had resigned. Now everyone in the compound is talking about you. Some people are even saying you took state-owned technology for your own private use." Ethan delayed his promotion just to suppress those reports. "He's truly doing this for your own good." I sneered inwardly. Let it slip? More likely, she had wailed in front of those gossiping wives about how I had abandoned our hero commander for money. And as for reporting me, I pulled a stack of official documents from my bag and flipped through them one by one right in front of them. First, my resignation was specially approved by the provincial department. It is perfectly legal. Second, every single patent my factory uses has been filed with the National Patent Office. The patent holder is me, Lucy Reed, personally. Third, I stared at Ethan and said, one word at a time, Ethan, your so-called good for me is just an attempt to drag me back into that cage so I can go back to being the invisible woman who has to step aside every time Sarah cries. Lucy, how could you think of me that way? Pain filled Ethan's eyes. Sarah, she really didn't mean to hurt you. She came here to tell you that she gave the jade pendant back to me. There's really nothing between us. I've always just looked at her as a sister. As a sister, and looking at her as a sister, justifies carrying her out of the auditorium during our wedding? I laughed, the laughter so bitter it almost brought tears to my eyes. Ethan, do you even believe that? In this day and age, you know better than I do what it means for a man to pick up a woman and rush out of a hall like that. You gave her the most respectable vanity in the world, and you gave me the most unbearable humiliation. And now you're telling me she's just a sister? Ethan was speechless. The confidence he had long held, built on his rank and moral high ground, completely collapsed. Just then, a black sedan pulled up at the factory gate. Silas stepped out holding a thick folder. He didn't even give Ethan a glance. He walked straight to my side and naturally handed me the documents. President Reed, here is the letter of intent for cooperation from Silicon Valley. Also, regarding the matter of Miss Sarah Miller accidentally spreading rumors, the lawyer I hired has already finished gathering evidence. Defamation, picking quarrels and provoking trouble, and interfering with normal business operations, the evidence is rock solid. Sarah's face turned as white as paper. She clutched Ethan's arm, trembling. Ethan, I just didn't want Lucy to get taken advantage of out here. The evidence is all here. Miss Miller can explain her concerns in court, Silas said, his voice as cold as a blade. Ethan looked at Silas, then at me, his expression shifting from anger to shock, finally settling into a gray, lifeless void. He finally understood that the man beside me could give me what he never could: respect, protection, and the right to stand side by side to look out at the world. Lucy, if I had... He opened his mouth, his voice hoarse. There are no ifs, I interrupted him, my gaze clear and steady. Ethan, the moment you turned your back in that auditorium, whatever was between us died for good. The Lucy standing here now isn't anyone's fiancée or anyone's imaginary rival. I am the owner of this factory and a builder of this special zone. I pointed toward the gate. Take your sister and go. Don't show up at my factory gates again. I want the air here to stay clean. It was as if Ethan's spine had been ripped out of him in an instant. He gave me one last deep look, a look filled with a lifetime of regret, but it could never earn a single backward glance from me. He turned away numbly, shaking off Sarah's hand, and walked toward the dusty road. Sarah screamed and chased after her, but the man who had once treated her like a precious treasure didn't help her up even once. I knew Ethan's military career would be severely impacted by this leave and the scandal, and as for Sarah, what awaited her was the full force of the law and a lifetime of being shunned by the compound. But none of that had anything to do with me anymore. President Reed, we haven't finished signing the orders yet, Silas said, looking at me with a smile. I'm coming. I turned and strode toward the office building. I pushed open the door to see the world-changing wave of construction in Pengcheng outside the window. Sunlight flooded my desk in a brilliant golden sheet. In this life, I had finally reclaimed the light that belonged to me.